It's 2 o'clock, so we'll start. I know people are still dialing in, but thank you so much for coming to this event. It's a really interesting event, and unlike any of our other plan talks, because it actually relates to one of my projects that Natalie and I initiated originally. And it's really interesting that we can actually use this as a space to show people where it's got to. It's still very much in development, but it's really exciting that we can use this space for this. Before we start, I know that as with any tech project and anything that whenever you try to show something from a tech space, it's always going to go wrong. So Matthew, don't worry, we know it goes wrong. And I'll hark back to the last time I tried to do a presentation on tech, and my presentation deleted itself halfway through. So don't worry. There's not much to worry about. Just kind of in terms of housekeeping before we kick off, I thought it's really important to just remind everybody that first of all, this is very much an interactive space. So it'd be really great if you've got any questions, any queries, any ideas about this as we go on through. Please put them in the question box on the side. They'll be fed through to me. The format is exactly the same in about 15 minutes of presentation, and then we'll move on to a question and answer space for about 15 minutes. And with any questions we don't get to, we'll try and get responses back to you. So shall we move on to the presentations? But before we start, Matthew, just to introduce Matthew here. Matthew is Head of Digital Twins. What is it? What's your job title? So particularly exciting and challenging job title at 3D Repo, and I'm sure Matthew will cover a bit more about what 3D Repo do in just a moment. So you'll be able to hear my emails pinging non-stop. So moving to our presentation, I've got a couple of slides that I wanted to talk people through before we kind of get too far. The Civic Innovation Challenge is a challenge set by the Mayor each year. We're in partnership with a number of different organisations. In this case, the Civic Innovation Challenge this year was run by Social Tech Trust and Microsoft. So 2 really high-profile organisations that are really into taking on some of the challenges that we face as a civic organisation, and trying to use that to encourage tech firms to find solutions. We announced the project, my word, this year's gone surprisingly fast, in January 2020, and the winners, who are 3D Repo, who will come to the logic of their project in a moment, were announced in March, the last event before City Hall closed for lockdown, I believe. We got that one in by the skin of our teeth, with the aim to deliver a product for test by summer. The challenge this year was around democratising planning. I don't know if there's another slide next that explains democratising planning, but yeah, this is it. In practice, if we were to talk about how residents experience the planning system, it often explains why we receive mixed responses to planning applications, and often a far more emotional response than a very kind of analytical response about how development proposals really impact people. So here are some really kind of key stats that are really important to us. I think the second one is kind of that hammers it home. Just 40% of the population feel comfortable reading a map. If that's the case, then with planning applications, it's not surprising that we expect people to read a 2-dimensional plan and then give us anything other than an emotional response. And then the one that kind of terrifies me the most is actually the response rate to public consultations is surprisingly low. 1.5% of local population to development proposals. So yeah, it creates a really interesting space. And the real question here is whether people aren't responding because they don't understand development proposals. So we can move to the next slide, please. The Civic Innovation Challenge was essentially how can you use technology to address that question, with the theory that if people are able to understand a development proposal, they may give us a different type of response and a different material response that may enable us to design development in a much more effective way that can relate better to community. We had 60 applications, shortlisted it down to 12. So 12 really different projects with 4 finalists who once again came up to very different proposals. I've got the images of them there, but in essence we had future folks who wanted to propose a really clever platform that did a lot of sentiment analysis. We had another project that wanted to take 2-dimensional drawings and turning them into 3D models in an automated way, which was really fascinating. A Landhawk who were looking at the potential to use a lot more data and giving residents a lot more data about a development area. And then 3D Repo, who were looking at coming up with 3D reproduction proposals that enable people to really comment on those bits and understand those bits that are potentially harmful. So that kind of tees you up, Matthew, to kind of go through where you are with your project.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Oh, sorry, there was one more. Sorry, I thought this one was.
Oh, sorry, there was one more slide. Sorry, I do apologise. We have been playing in this space for a while. The interesting stats, and we wanted to share them because we had to go using Commonplace for a couple of our consultations. And our learning is that digital platforms do enable people to get a lot more information. And the green line you can see on the graph has been when we've managed to get residents to look at proposals. But the interesting challenge is the blue line below, which although we've getting people to the digital platform, the conversion rate to get comments, to get their real feelings about development proposals is shockingly low. And we don't necessarily think that that's anything to do with the fact we were using Commonplace, because actually we achieved a huge amount. But we do know that we need to think slightly more cleverly about how we achieve that conversion rate. So there we go.
Okay. So on to what 3D Repo is bringing to the table and what our goal was with this new kind of visual consultation. So we wanted a new way to communicate the built environment and the community to the public. We felt that by displaying the proposals in 3D, we can help people get much needed context that they couldn't get in 2D drawings, as Peter mentioned earlier. We also saw that consultations evolve from early stages through to final planning proposals, and they don't necessarily follow a linear kind of A, B, C release path, and that actually maybe a digital platform could help release information and change things in the consultation and evolve it as it's going. We wanted to complement existing remote, so web-based applications like Peter mentioned before, and also face-to-face tools and processes. We're not looking to completely wipe out other aspects of this existing process. We just want to slot in useful ways and embed ourselves into existing workflows. Of course, we want inclusive engagement, and we want increased participation, and we want contextualized user feedback. So it's not just that we want more. One of the problems with data is the more you get, the more you have to then deal with. So it's how do we contextualize that feedback so that the people making the decisions can really see what the public and the community think about the plans. So who's 3D Repo? We're a startup company with 6 years in the construction industry. I know it's a bit strange, 6 years. We're still technically classed as a startup. We've received 6 innovation grants so far from Innovate UK, where we've worked in a variety of different consortiums. We've won 20 prestigious awards and grants, and we are a UK government approved supplier. Our platform is ISO 27001 certified, and what that means is the data that is on 3D Repo is safe and secure and hosted in the UK. So onto the construction problem. 3D Repo tends to exist in the RIBA stages 3 to 4 areas, so develop, design through to construction. The reason we're there is because we've seen this rise of 3D models, which is often referred to as BIM, in construction because the process of building has evolved beyond 2D drawings. And also that the businesses involved in that construction process have evolved beyond just handling documents, and instead they're starting to handle large sets of data. And that was great. The 3D models helped solve that problem, but actually they brought with them other problems, which was multiple different softwares, file formats, and basically a frustrating experience for those that were involved in 3D models. And they had to use expensive software packages, and there was increased IT overheads. So I want to dive into what exactly 3D Repo is and how it works, because I think that's going to contextualize what we've managed to do with Planbase in such a short period of time. So first of all, 3D Repo is a 3D cloud management platform. And what that means is it's a website that can display 3D models, in essence. So you can send your colleague a hyperlink, and they can open up a 3D model, and you have confidence that what you sent them is what they're going to see. And the great thing is that then if you create a new version of the model, you know that all the people in your network will then see the latest version of the model without having to go to your document management system, download the latest one. And then from there, we sort of started to think, okay, we've got this model management view, then what do we want to do with it? We want to start soliciting feedback from people in the industry and on the project. So people can look at models, architects can upload models, structural engineers can upload models, and they can start to see if they clash together, if they're going to have issues with construction. Schedulers can start to build what we call 4D animations of the construction process. So people could start to understand where their work fits in with the larger picture and if there's going to be any issues with logistics and things like that. And then we looked at model validation. So what if I've got two versions of a model and I want to understand what's different between those two sets of information? How do I visualize that? So 3D Repo allows people to see that in a way that you would typically associate with reviews in Word documents. So where you get the red lines crossed out, this is what's new, this is what's changed. And then we let people create commentary from those comparisons. So if you do see something that you don't quite like, you can put in a comment and change it. So the back end of 3D Repo is a fully open source platform. What that means is we basically put our source code up on the internet for anyone to interrogate. That means that there's complete transparency in the way that the platform works. And we also open ourselves up to integration using APIs. So what that means is that other software systems that have nothing to do with 3D Repo can start to push and pull information in. And then we also have some state-of-the-art model compression and some patent pending viewing technology. So we decided when we saw the Civic Innovation Challenge, well, maybe let's see how we can move into this RIBA stage 0 to 2. So we can apply our existing technology to these new opportunities. We can join up the construction process so the work that's happening earlier on in the process is not completely lost when we get to the construction phase. We were really interested in spreading the use of open source tools across the wider construction and industry world, and also explore further uses of 3D as a communication tool. You know, we don't think that the be all and end all of BIM and 3D is just in the construction phase. So I'm going to go on to a demo. The first thing about the demo of Planbase, our new product, is that the models have been provided by a company called Cities who do some mapping. The key thing to say here is, as Peter pointed out from the timeline earlier,
as with all good tech projects, your internet's frozen you slightly. Are you still there, Matthew? Matthew? It's the critical moment where I can't take over. Hold on. Matthew, are you back?
Hang on. Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Better? Perfect. Go for it.
Okay, I had to turn off my webcam, and I think it's because I'm about to play a video and it didn't like that. So I want to run through a video of Planbase working. So the main aim is we bring those 3D views into your browser. And from there, we can start to ask the public questions, but we're asking them questions with the context of the 3D model. So we can say, hey, do you like this bicycle path? And they can decide to leave a comment and rate it with a score, which you'll see me do here. And the goal of that is now that those comments exist in a 3D world related to this bike path. So we've got some context when we're looking and reviewing these comments. And then we can move on to the next question, which is still about the cycle highway, but we want to give people a broader understanding of where it's moving. So that's the great thing about 3D. We can swap between these different contexts and give people additional information when they need it. Let's move on to the next one. And the great thing about having these bookmarks and questions is that the users can zip around the planning phase however they feel they want to. So if they're more interested in residential areas, they can skip around to the residential bit. And we're just constantly giving this narrative so that the public can see what it is about this consultation. And the great thing there, I don't know if you saw that happen, was we moved from the outside of the project. We're sort of talking about some affordable housing, and we wanted to move in and say, oh, sorry, that was annoying. We wanted to move in and say, okay, well, what is the experience like from inside the area? So what can you see from the balcony? This is a typically industrial area. Is that compatible with the nature of the affordable housing? And then we'll just type this comment in. And then we can start to tie things together. So we spoke about the bicycle lanes earlier, so we can go ahead and talk to the users about what about new bicycle racks that complement that new bicycle lane, and they can see where they are, and we think it just gives them that extra bit of context. And then the great thing about this is now, because we've got this living 3D model in our browser, what if the user's getting a bit tired of our standard narrative views and they actually just want to peel off and see the view for themselves? So they can kind of zoom out, they can look at the neighborhood as a whole, they can go over to their house if they want to and say, okay, well, what does it look like from my house? What are these views like? How is my life going to change because of these plans? And then we can start to visualize social and community gatherings as well. So in this instance, we're saying, what about a new food market that might open up? And we can get people's feedback on that. And then the next stage we were looking at is, that's great for the guided narrative process, and we think that's a really powerful tool. But what happens if we want to let people just basically freely navigate and lay pins anywhere in the 3D world and start to comment so that they can leave additional information about the way that they're interacting with the community? And we gather all those things up and let people see each other's comments and vote on the comments. So then on to my final slide. I should point out as well, there is a disclaimer in the corner here. This is a fictional project, and we're just using it to illustrate the process at the moment. So how can you access Planbase, or how will you be able to access Planbase? You can access it through the browser in the same way we do with 3D Repo. We can embed Planbase into existing planning experiences. And then also, using our partners with Mission Room, we can set up environments in community centers where we can project Planbase onto a screen and really encourage people to come up, point at the screen. So even those less technically savvy can still get involved in the process and don't feel like they're being left out.
Great. Hold on. If you stop sharing your screen, you'll be able to see me again and switch your camera back on.
Hang on.
I'm always so pleased when other people's tech presentations struggle. So thank you for that. So we've got a few questions have come in, and as is always the case, if you've got any other questions, please can you pop them in the question box on the side. The first question someone sent in was, this is all well and good, but actually, how tech savvy do people need to be able to build their proposals into it?
To build their proposals in. So we use, to build this proposal out, I've used SketchUp, which is a pretty standard tool, basically a 3D paint. A lot of people consider it. You can kind of push and pull objects. And you can go out to a marketplace to pull in standard objects like sports pitches, benches, and things like that. So not too much. There will certainly be a step up, but it's nothing like you might expect from looking at the platform.
The second kind of area of questions has been, oh, actually, just to reiterate that point, the paint thing. Even I've had to go at SketchUp, and if I can use it, anyone can. So, the second thing is around different types of consultations that can be used in this environment. And I noticed on your presentation in the fly-through piece, you kind of went at a high level and a low level. Is it intended to be a tool for kind of single building consultations, or is it intended to be a strategic planning tool?
Yeah, so we looked at how the platform can serve kind of both ends of the spectrum, and we think that 3D on single residential buildings can add additional detail, especially with things like views and right to light and how people will engage with that particular building, how it affects ped flow and things like that. And then we also think from a phase-wide community side, we can actually illustrate time, you know, how a community and how an area is going to change over time and how that impacts people, which again, we think that's very hard to illustrate in 2D. You really need that animation to show people flying through. So yeah, the intent is to cover every end of that spectrum.
So that's really interesting. The next one was, have you yet had a chance to kind of test it with people, or where does that fit in your project?
So the goal of the Civic Innovation Challenge was to get us to a point by the end of June where we had a platform that worked, and then we're going to go out to public testing. Obviously, that's been tweaked slightly the way we're going to run it based on the past few months. But yeah, the goal is to have this in people's hands that are not GLA or 3D Repo members of staff in the next few weeks.
The next question actually is really sensible that I hadn't really thought about, which is, can we import BIM models / data into Planbase?
Yeah, so if you've got a project that's already reaching that stage 1 or stage 2 area where you're actually doing feasibility, or you're actually doing kind of client interactions, and you really want to pitch specific areas of the design or the project, yes, we can just pull in information from Revit or ArchiCAD or any of the popular kind of, or we can convert data from those into Planbase.
So actually, people could theoretically go back with a model they've built for other purposes and just dump it into this.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
sorry, I just hadn't tweaked that. Actually, I had that level.
No. It was more the word dump that I was. We'll place them lovingly into Planbase, and yeah, it's excellent. And also because we're using those compatible systems, it can be the first step in a BIM journey. So rather than working backwards into Planbase, we can actually start to share some of the skills that the later stage construction teams have and pull them in a little bit earlier, because a lot of times models are created during the planning phase and then they're basically remade again during early design and then remade again for detailed design.
So it has the potential for kind of a little bit of a cost reduction for developers in the process.
Yeah, definitely.
That's a whole new interesting angle. Thanks for that. Then to kind of take it back to the kind of the core point of the project, how do you see this as a tool to democratise planning?
So I think we're looking at kind of borderless planning of where does the project end and what happens just beyond the borders of planning and who's involved in this, and by having a tool that's online, we're basically reducing the friction of engagement. All people have to do is receive an email, a text message, or a post on Facebook, and they can instantly engage with the plans. And we think that really, that reducing friction really helps this process.
That's really interesting, and obviously you've not got to that point of the project yet as to whether you can test that hypothesis is real. So the way you're going to do that is by embedding links into other places, and people can then kind of come and go and capture that. Have you spent much time thinking about how you're going to be able to extract the information from it? So you collect lots of comments, and local authorities are then going to be interested in kind of looking at the comments that have come back. Do they need to look at it on the model, or are they able to kind of extract it somehow?
Yeah, so because 3D Repo was built around that openness, and Planbase has inherited that, all of the data that exists in 3D Repo can be extracted out into, you know, if anyone's using Power BI to visualize things, or into a system that they're already using, we can push those in. So they could go into Trello, they could go, you know, anywhere. We could even print them off into a report and hand them out physically if we want. So really, once that data's in 3D Repo, it's really up to the planners how they want to use it.
Yeah, that's intriguing. But so what are your next steps in developing the tool?
So we're going out for testing, like we mentioned, in a few weeks. That's, I think, an 8-week period set out at the moment. And then the goal there is not just to test that the platform works from a technical point of view, but to test what people are looking for in terms of how they interact with the product, what other features they might have. And some of that might be a learning process for Planbase to develop the system, and some of it might be a learning process to help us work with the planners that are going to be importing content into Planbase, of how best to present it in order to get that engagement. Because the platform in and of itself is not necessarily solving the problem, it's the platform plus the content that's really the key to increasing the engagement.
So kind of one other question that's been raised then, and I think you've kind of already answered it, is how are you integrating people's opinions, stroke comments and needs into the planning process, stroke plan? I think what they mean is you've not finished developing the tool yet, so how are you going to capture people's kind of opinions of the tool and build them into the tool?
So that will be part of the planning, the testing process. So we will do surveys and on the people that use it, and we would like to. What we'll normally do is we'll do it during a video conference, so we'll actually see them using the tool and understand what it is they're doing. And then I think the other point around how does the tool sort of create data around the plan is that, because the planners are responsible for putting that narrative content and those questions in, and the responses are recorded against that narrative, you can start to really pinpoint where it is you want to receive data, and really target those areas.
Yeah, that's really interesting and has some real potential use then, doesn't it? Yeah, I'm quite excited about seeing your testing on this now. Actually, that will be kind of one of the most interesting outcomes. And I think the other thing that I've learned from today is actually maybe we want to have a dumping a BIM model into it to see what happens. Oh, hold on. There's one last question, then we've got to wrap up because we're running quite close to time. Will the end user, public, be able to use this on a mobile device?
At the moment, part of the Civic Innovation Challenge wasn't to deliver a mobile product, just because the scope would have taken longer than the time that we had. But we're exploring ways in which it can be used on a mobile, either with the fully integrated experience, or with maybe a slightly reduced mobile experience. So that's maybe kind of come out of our testing phase as well. But we're certainly not intending to leave that market behind.
No, I think that's really fun. You've achieved a huge amount in a 5-week sprint. I take my hat off to you. So I think it's possibly a bit mean of me to ask that question right at the end. But so the answer to that is not quite yet, but maybe one day.
Yes.
And that one day may not be that far away in some shape or form. No, so thank you ever so much for that. That was really intriguing, even for me as the project lead. That was really interesting to see in place, and to see the fly through and the start of what's being developed. And I can see lots of uses, although I see it was really early version of the product show. So thank you so much. Only leaves me to say to Lucy and Natalie for making this event happen, and I will leave you to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.